Hi guys, today on the show we're going to talk about the attempt to separate Buddhism from Hinduism, treat it as some sort of a new separate religion, how that is a new attempt and how that is completely false. My name is Sharma. Welcome to the Sharma Show. Hello and welcome. Welcome to another edition of the Sharma Show. Thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you. So essentially, before, a very recent period, there was not really any talk about how Buddhism was like some separate, completely different entity. Buddha never talked about that himself. He was born into a Hindu family, he lived a Hindu life, and he espoused principles that were deeply seeped in Hindu philosophy. His practices, his meditations, and the ceremonies that he talked about had a very deep Hindu imprint on them. But nevertheless, there is a very strong attempt by historians, by the intelligentsia, by the media to create this narrative that Buddhism, for some reason, is this completely new entity. It is a very similar thing that historians and some vested interests have done with Sikhism, trying to create a narrative that Sikhism is this completely separate thing, this completely new thing, completely divorced from Hinduism, which is again completely false. I'm going to make a video on that in the future as well. But I want to talk about Buddhism today because there's a very similar narrative created around Buddhism as well. Essentially, even if you look at the Buddha's teachings, his teachings are very similar to the teachings that you find in the Upanishads. One of the biggest myths that has been propagated in India is that Buddhist teachings and Buddhist philosophy is somehow completely divorced and completely separate from the teachings that you find in Hindu philosophy. In fact, Buddhist philosophy relies heavily on some Indian Hindu concepts that it obviously takes for granted. Those main concepts are the belief in transmigration and the belief in the concept of karma. The actual meditation practices that are taught by the Buddha are also very similar to the meditation practices that are taught in Vedantic traditions. The concept of nirvana and the concept of moksha are very similar as well. In many countries, especially in countries where the Mahayana arm of Buddhism is stronger, for example, in Tibet, in Japan, a lot of their ceremonies also borrow heavily from the Hindu yajna ceremonies. It is important to remember that the Buddha had given up on material and social life, but he had not given up on the Hindu life. He became a sannyasi, which is again important to remember that it is a very core aspect of the Varnashram system. People before the Buddha have been part of this system as well. You have the examples of Shiva, Yajnavalkya. Even since Buddha, you have people who have lived that lifestyle that are broadly considered to be part of the Hindu system. For example, Shankaracharya, Aurobindo, Vivekananda. A great way to explain this is to give you like a rock and roll sort of example. So I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this probably listened to Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit when they were in school or college or somewhere around that time. Now these bands were classified in this subgenre called new metal or alternative rock. And just because they're new metal or alternative rock doesn't mean that they're not still rock and roll. They are still a rock band. It's just that they also have a subcategory. There are certain things that are unique to them. There are certain things that are new to them, but they're still a rock band. I feel like that is a good way to explain where Buddhism stands with respect to Hinduism. It is still steeped in Hindu concepts, and it just creates and provides a new way to look at some of those concepts. Another way that we can look at the way there's been an attempt to separate Buddhism from Hinduism is the choice of symbols. There was an attempt after independence by the government to remove Hinduism from the Indian identity. So then they chose symbols like the Ashokan lions and they chose symbols like the chakra, which are considered to be Buddhist symbols. And again, this was an attempt to divorce Hinduism from the Indian identity and to divorce Buddhism from Hinduism as well. To prove that this is a recent phenomena, all you need to do is look at the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955. In the Hindu Marriage Act of 1955, Jains, Sikhs, Buddhists, they're all mentioned and they're all considered part of the Hindu fabric. The major development that came recently where people started to differentiate Buddhism from Hinduism came after Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar became a Buddhist, and then he started talking about leaving Hinduism to become a Buddhist. Just because you believe in something means that you leave all of your previous knowledge and all of your previous heritage behind is not a Hindu concept. This is a very Abrahamic concept. This is what Islam and Christianity require you to do. In Hinduism, because you have a belief in something does not require you to let go of all previous knowledge and let go of all traditions. Various different concepts and various different teachings have flourished under Hinduism. This is how Hinduism thrives and survives. Just because you're a Shaivite, just because you worship Shiva, does not mean that you hate Krishna. That's a silly concept. That's a silly concept that for some reason Indians have started to believe in. It is only in a Hindu country that somebody like Gautam Buddha could have freely propagated and promulgated his beliefs. In any other country, in a Muslim country, for example, he would probably have been beheaded. In a Christian country, he would probably have been burnt at the stake, which was very common. In India, on the other hand, gurus and teachers like Mahavir, like Buddha, like Nanak can freely propagate and promulgate their philosophies and their teachings. And there are millions of Hindus that revere them like teachers and gurus and like gods. Again, there is no record of Gautam Buddha renouncing Hinduism and creating Buddhism as a new separate thing. His work may have been critical of certain aspects of Hinduism, but all of his teachings are deeply rooted in Hindu philosophy. In fact, you can find this phrase in the Dhammapad. You can find this phrase by the Buddha which says, Eso Dhammo Sanatano, which means this is Sanatana Dharma. So again, there might be some differences between Hinduism and Buddhism in terms of teachings and philosophy, but there are no structural differences there. Gautam Buddha did not attempt to create something new. He wanted to stay under the Hindu umbrella. And so it is very important that we fight this narrative and that we put this narrative to bed. In fact, Buddhists today face the same challenges as Hindus as well, in terms of conversion, in terms of threats that they face from Islam. So they face very similar challenges. So it is very important that we reclaim that common ground, that we reclaim that common heritage, and we work together. We unite and we work together as one culture, one civilization against the threats that are facing us today. Again, guys, thank you very much for watching today's episode. Please let me know what you think about this whole narrative that's been created. If there's something you agree with me on, if there's something you disagree with me on, please let me know. If you think that I've missed something out as well, please let me know in the comment section down below. Also, guys, if you enjoy what we do here on the Sham Sharma Show, please make sure to leave us a like, leave us a thumbs up. It helps me out. It helps the channel out. And you can also subscribe to the show's channel down below or right over here. I will see you for the next episode of the Sham Sharma Show. And until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you soon.